Right now, every email you send is traveling through a cable no thicker than a garden hose. Every video you stream, every banking transaction you make, all of it, moving through physical cables lying on the ocean floor, buried just a few meters beneath the surface. And 17 of those cables pass through a single narrow stretch of water between Iran and Oman. Together, they carry roughly 30% of all global internet traffic. 3 billion people depend on them every single day. And the most uncomfortable truth of this entire war, the one nobody in the American government is saying out loud, is this: the United States Navy cannot stop Iran from cutting every single one of them. Most people believe the internet is something in the sky, a cloud, satellites bouncing signals down to phones and laptops, wireless, intangible. That is not how the internet works. 95 to 97% of every piece of international data traveling anywhere on Earth right now is moving through physical cables lying on the ocean floor. There is no backup. There is no satellite network capable of handling this volume. If enough of those cables are cut at the right points, the internet as we know it simply stops working for entire regions of the planet. Let us start with what an undersea cable actually is, because understanding the scale of the problem starts with understanding how fragile the thing is. A modern international cable that carries internet traffic is roughly the thickness of a garden hose. Inside that hose is a bundle of glass fibers, each one no wider than a human hair, that carry pulses of light at nearly the speed of light. A single cable can move more than 1 trillion bits of information per second. A single cable can carry every phone call, every text message, every streaming video, every banking transaction moving between 2 continents. That is the scale of what a single cable no thicker than your garden hose is doing right now. These cables get laid by specialized ships over a period of months. They get buried under the seafloor where they approach shore, so that fishing anchors cannot catch them. Where the water is deeper, they just lie on the bottom, held in place by their own weight and the calm of the seafloor. For most of their length, they are invisible. They do not show up on public maps. They do not broadcast their position. They simply sit there, carrying the nervous system of the global economy, day and night, with nobody but a few specialized engineers even aware they exist. Now, here is where it gets really interesting. The world's entire undersea cable network has 2 critical choke points, 2 narrow passages where dozens of these cables get bundled together because the geography forces them to. The first choke point is the Red Sea, the corridor connecting Europe to Asia through the Suez Canal. 16 major cable systems run through that water. The second choke point is the Strait of Hormuz, that narrow passage between Iran and Oman that is only 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point. Every single cable connecting the Persian Gulf countries to the rest of the global internet runs through that strait, and both of those choke points are now active war zones at the same time, which has never happened before in the history of the internet. Here is what makes this worse. The engineers who built these cables knew Iran was a risk. They did something specific to avoid it. They deliberately routed every one of those 17 cables through the waters on the southern side of the strait, on the Omani side, to stay out of Iranian territorial waters. That was the entire plan. Keep the cables away from Iran. On paper, this works. In reality, it does not work at all, because Iran does not need to be in its own waters to reach those cables. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy operates a small fleet of diesel-electric submarines specifically designed for shallow water operations in the Persian Gulf. The Ghadir class is about 120 feet long, carries a crew of 18, and can stay underwater for several days at a time. The Fateh class is larger and more capable. Neither of these submarines is built to fight another navy. They are built to operate quietly, close to shore, in exactly the kind of water where cables run. The Revolutionary Guard also operates trained combat divers who have spent decades practicing the exact kind of underwater sabotage that would be required to cut a cable. But here is the problem. Cutting a cable does not even require a submarine or a diver. It does not require any sophisticated technology at all. In March of 2024, a cargo ship named the MV Rubimar was hit by a missile in the Red Sea. As it sank, its anchor dragged across the seafloor and sliced through 3 undersea cables at the same time. The damage took 6 months to repair. 6 months. And that was one ship, with one anchor, doing it by accident, during a different war. If Iran wanted to do this deliberately, it could happen this afternoon, and nobody would know for certain who did it until weeks later. The history of what happens when these cables fail is not a theoretical discussion. It is a record of real-world consequences that have already played out. In 2008, 4 cables were cut near Egypt in the Mediterranean. The cause was never fully confirmed. For several weeks, India's international internet bandwidth dropped by 60%. Banks could not process international transactions at normal speed. Stock exchanges slowed. Call centers that handle American customer service for major companies went dark. That was 4 cables, in peacetime, hundreds of miles from any war. What we are talking about now is 17 cables, in an active war zone, with a government that has publicly threatened to target them. There is another angle that almost nobody is talking about. On March 1st of this year, just after the war with Iran began, Iranian drones struck 3 data center complexes belonging to Amazon Web Services, 2 in the United Arab Emirates, 1 in Bahrain. This was the first time in any conflict that cloud computing infrastructure had been directly attacked by military action. For a few hours, banking systems, payment platforms, and business software across 6 countries simply stopped working. Amazon Web Services is the company that runs the back end of roughly a third of the internet. When Amazon servers are offline, the internet is functionally broken for billions of users at once, and Iran just proved it has the drones, the targeting data, and the political will to hit them directly. Now, stop and think about the cold math here. A trained combat diver with a basic cutting tool can sever a cable that cost hundreds of millions of dollars to lay. A dragging anchor from an old rusted cargo ship can do the same thing in the course of a single bad afternoon. On the other side of this equation, the United States Navy has spent more than $1 trillion building warships, aircraft carriers, submarines, and defense systems. A Chinese-made cutting tool in the hands of a Revolutionary Guard diver costs less than a used car. An American Arleigh Burke destroyer costs more than $2 billion. That is the asymmetry that is keeping American admirals awake at night. Every single asset the United States Navy has is expensive, visible, and designed to fight other warships. The thing Iran is threatening to do costs almost nothing, cannot be seen from the surface, and cannot be defended against with missiles. Now let us talk about the specific cables Iran is threatening, because each one is a backbone for a different piece of the global economy. The Falcon cable, operated by Flag Telecom, connects Mumbai to the Gulf and moves more than 40 trillion bits of data per second. If that cable goes down, India loses a huge portion of its connection to Europe overnight. The Gulf Bridge International Cable connects Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Iran itself to the rest of the world. It is the single digital backbone of the entire Gulf region. If it gets cut, 7 countries go partially dark at the same time. The Meta 2 Africa Pearls extension was supposed to be the most ambitious undersea cable project ever attempted. A 45,000-kilometer cable designed to connect the Gulf to Africa, Europe, and South Asia, reaching 3 billion people with high-speed service. That project is now frozen. The French company contracted to lay it, Alcatel Submarine Networks, officially declared force majeure, a legal term that means we cannot safely operate here. We are walking away. Their cable-laying ship, the Ile de Batz, is sitting stranded off the Saudi coast. Billions of dollars in investment, paused indefinitely. This is where the conversation fundamentally changes, because the damage from a cable cut does not stop at slower internet speeds. It reaches directly into the American economy in ways most people have never considered. Amazon, Microsoft, and Google have spent the last 5 years and tens of billions of dollars building massive data center complexes in the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. Those data centers were supposed to be the foundation for the next generation of artificial intelligence. They run on cables that pass through the same waters Iran is threatening. Cut the cables, and those data centers become unusable, even if the buildings themselves are perfectly intact. The billions spent, the long-term strategy of American technology companies, the race for artificial intelligence dominance against China, all of it runs through cables Iran could sever with a diver and a cutting tool. India runs its entire information technology export sector through these cables. That sector generates $250 billion a year. When you call the customer service line for a major American bank, there is a good chance you are speaking with a person in Mumbai or Bangalore, whose computer is connected to the American bank's computers through a cable that runs past Iran. Iran cutting the cables does not just hurt India. It hurts every American who interacts with a system that depends on Indian back-end services, which is roughly every working American who uses modern technology. The internet outage would not be theoretical. It would show up as failed transactions, delayed approvals, error messages, and slowdowns across every banking and commerce platform. And there is a second problem that compounds the first one. Even if a cable gets cut, the ships that can repair it may not be able to reach it. There are roughly 60 specialized cable repair vessels in the entire world. That number is not in the thousands. It is 60. Each one is expensive to operate and requires a highly specialized crew. None of them can safely enter a war zone. If Iran cuts cables in the Strait of Hormuz right now, those cables could remain severed for months, possibly longer, possibly until the war ends completely. But here is the most disturbing part of this story, the part that explains why the United States Navy cannot stop this. The problem is not a lack of equipment. The problem is geography. The cables are too long. They run for hundreds of miles through water that changes conditions constantly. A diver placed in the water from a fishing boat on a dark night, armed with basic cutting tools, could reach a cable and sever it before anyone on the surface noticed anything unusual. The attack would take less than an hour. The repair would take months. And by the time anyone figured out who did it, the damage would already be complete. So here is the question that matters. The most powerful navy in human history has 2 aircraft carriers in the region, 18 warships on station, 10,000 sailors working around the clock, every piece of advanced detection technology the American military has ever built. Against this stands a small Iranian submarine, a few trained combat divers, and a threat to a cable the size of a garden hose. Is this the defining military paradox of our time, where American power has become so dependent on invisible digital infrastructure that a regime with basic tools can hold it hostage? Or is this a bluff that Iran would never carry out, because doing so would end the regime within 48 hours of the first cable going dark? One side says this is the future of warfare, and America is not ready for it. The other side says Iran is a paper tiger that will not dare to pull the trigger. There is one more piece of this story that needs to be told: the Taiwan Strait. China is watching every move Iran makes in the Strait of Hormuz, not because Beijing cares about Iranian oil tankers, because the Taiwan Strait has the exact same cables, running through the exact same kind of narrow choke point, carrying the exact same kind of critical data that the world cannot afford to lose. The lesson Iran is teaching in 2026 is simple. If you control a narrow waterway, and you are willing to use unconventional tools against infrastructure that cannot be defended with warships, you can hold the global economy hostage without firing a single shot at a navy. China has diesel-electric submarines. China has trained combat divers. China has laid underwater drones across the seafloor of the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait. And China has been watching Iran prove, in real time, that the United States Navy has no clean answer to this specific problem. Russia is watching too. The Baltic Sea has cable routes running between Europe and Scandinavia. The Black Sea has cables connecting Ukraine and Georgia to the rest of the world. Russia has submarines. Russia has divers. Russia has already demonstrated a willingness to attack critical infrastructure. The template Iran is building in 2026 does not stay in the Persian Gulf. It becomes doctrine. Every hostile regime with access to a strategic waterway is now asking the same question. Why fight the American Navy when you can bypass it completely by targeting the infrastructure the Navy was never designed to protect? Now think about what this means for the average person watching this video. You are not a naval strategist, but every single thing you do online, every transaction, every email, every video call, depends on these cables staying intact. If Iran cuts the 17 cables in the Strait of Hormuz, your internet does not just slow down. Entire services stop working. Your bank app stops processing transfers. Your company's cloud software goes offline. The customer service center you call when something breaks cannot answer because their computers are disconnected from the network. This is not a military problem. This is an everything problem. And the only defense the most powerful military in history can offer right now is to say, we are doing everything we can, but we cannot guarantee we can stop it. So write where you stand in the comments. Because the people who say American technology has a hidden weakness, and the people who say Iran is too scared to test it, are about to have the most important argument on this channel.